Let's get started. So 2 months ago, we began to field a firestorm of calls from clients, from past clients, from people we didn't even know about needs that were presenting themselves. And one that started early, I think because of awareness and concern and the uncertainty of where this was going, was a fear about not being able to have in-person activities, both currently, but more importantly in the summer, because we know there are a great number of organizations where your mission delivery and your purpose is really defined by these in-person experiences over the summer. And that was very concerning to us. So we were speaking with many of you about your mission impact, about program participation, what does this look like, and also about your revenue. Now, some of the organizations have summer programs that are free or no charge for constituents, but you're still developing revenue. You might not have the earned revenue, but you're still developing revenue from sponsorships and from investors who find these programs really valuable. So this was unacceptable to us, that there was going to be a period of time where you could not complete what you needed to do. And the types of people that we were talking with became so varied. At first, we were talking to camps because that's the obvious. But then we started talking to youth-based groups who have summer programming, and school groups, churches, community groups who have kind of vacation clubs and day systems for delivering their mission, education, information, and also providing a safe environment for kids to come together. Science academies, a lot of science centers, and others that were doing group programming, educational trips, in-person experiences. A wide variety of people began to reveal that this was going to be a problem for them. Great. So one of the things that we decided was online was a viable alternative, but we quickly realized that there was not a one-to-one translation ratio, and our friend and consultant Phillip will go into that in a little bit. And then we realized we don't have that knowledge. Phillip has that knowledge. Our clients in the organizations don't have that knowledge. We need to create something to transfer this knowledge and to make this an opportunity for organizations to begin to define how they're going to do this. One of the things I do want to point out, though, and it's one of these bullets, certainly the urgency is here now, and it's critical we do this for many people. Many organizations need this to happen if they're going to stay in operation. But more importantly is the value of this in changing how you're doing what you're doing. You're not going to abandon what you were doing, because there still remains quality outcomes and things that have to happen with in-person experiences, but this enhances the opportunity. So it reduces geographic boundaries, those that are confined to just a state or regional or city distribution could now think about doing this in a much broader way. We wanted to make sure that this program kept you client and constituent centered. That was very important to us. And we wanted to make sure that this was something that you could not only absorb and learn, but that the coach would actually walk you through building out a viable program and implementation plan. So at the end of the 5 days, the immersive, you actually can begin to execute on this. So who's benefiting here? Certainly your organization. You all have missions that you are promising the community you're going to deliver on, and you have a need to generate revenue through that as well for operations. Your staff. This is a great opportunity to be learning new skill sets, and those are inherently valuable personally to staff, but also to the ongoing production of your organization and the programs you design. And then finally, the community. There is a great loss, and we hear this personally as well from families and parents when we work with educational collaboratives or even in our own team, of the sadness that comes from not being able to have these programs continue in the summer. So this is a alternative way to continue to have that happen. Great. Our coach, Phillip Simon, great guy, has been tremendously instrumental in so many of our tech projects, and someone that I personally rely on for work here at Harvest as well. Invited speaker at national meetings. He has designed numerous programs. I'm going to hand it over to him now and let him finish telling you about himself and then lead us into a discussion. Please remember to use the Q&A at the bottom if you have questions. And I hope you do have a lot of questions, because one of the things we want to focus on here is making sure that we're delivering communications and information that you can use. So Phillip, so good to have you.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. So welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to try to be able to help organizations figure out the challenge of bringing what are typically in-person experiences into be able to teach those, experience those online. So what are the challenges for putting material online? And I've been doing this since 2004 in a lot of different contexts, whether it's for online learning, online instruction, training, from all different levels and ages. One of the first challenges is knowing what translates. What will work online that currently is in person, and not everything will work, obviously. I mean, an obvious example is maybe a swimming class. Although I suppose you could teach a stroke without being in the water, but that clearly would not be something that would work. But you'd be surprised what could work if you sort of use your imagination, and I can help you think about taking things outside of the box of being in person, and can that be done online? Maybe parts of it can be online. Maybe there's new opportunities since the person's in their home as opposed to coming to your facility. How do you transition? How do you take what currently is an in-person experience and make it a virtual experience? The lack of technological expertise, as you mentioned, that should not be a barrier. You shouldn't feel like that's a barrier. The tools that we use are not any more complicated than necessarily using Zoom or using some other basic kinds of online tools. So don't worry about the technology. We're not asking you to have to buy special software or special hardware. It's really just kind of translating what you know into a different way. Understanding the online learning experience is very, very important, because people really respond differently online, as you all know, than they do in person. And I think that's all been amplified 1,000-fold with the pandemic, and that we're all, for the most part, having to communicate and experience and do our work and see our relatives and learn and have our kids go to school through computers and using the internet. It's totally transforming the way we think about the way we communicate for the good. And I think we're discovering what for the bad, what doesn't work, what are the barriers. So part of what we can do in the course is helping understand how to translate, understanding the experience, so then you can do the best job in supporting people who are doing your program. And then what else? I mean, I think through the poll, we have a sense of what the other challenges are, which was terrific. I think then through the Q&A, if you want to provide some other thoughts, if you did the other on the poll, you can put those up there. I think a couple people actually, so Brenda said, summer camp, outdoor education, online programs. Camp is about unplugging. So how do you transition outdoor group dynamics to online? It's not, well, I wouldn't say it's not easy. It's a challenge. You have to really think through what works outdoors, what works in person, and what aspects of that could be done online. You don't have a group. We have a group in Zoom, let's say, but the person's by themselves. They don't have your resources in terms of your facility, so do they have to come up with their own resources? Do they have to prepare ahead of time? Can they be creative, inventive where they are at home and sort of create some challenges, some exciting things to do, which maybe they might not have thought of doing otherwise? So that's part of what the 5-day workshop will be about. Very much is about how do you unplug it and plug it back in to an online environment. And Elizabeth asked about, how long? How long can a program be? It's going to vary. We would look at how long your current program is, what aspects of it can go online, what can translate. Do you do an hour a day, 3 hours a day? I suspect the model that I'm thinking will work is that you have an in-person, a live experience with your campers or your group. They go off and they do some activities and they come back to share, to reflect, to see what they've done. And similar to the way we're actually going to run the 5-day workshop, in that there will be an hour of discussion, demonstration, sharing. You will go off, do activities, come back and reflect on what you've done. And as the week goes along, we'll have that see each other, work on your own, see each other, work on your own. And that's might not be a bad model for an online experience for your program. But once again, to be determined. And then I can look at some of these others as we go along. But finally, Carol asks, I think this is really, really important. Yeah, I think we're all feeling some burnout. I think there's been some psychologists are noting that the experience of interacting with your team, with your group, with your family online through Zoom and other means is starting to stress us out in ways we're surprised. I know if I spend a half a day on Zoom, I'm really kind of burnt out in a way that I'm not if I'm in my office or meeting with people for real. So that's it from a psychological perspective. It's interesting. What's going on? Is it we're not seeing the visual cues, the subtle visual cues in terms of body language and looking at their face or just being in the room? So that's a challenge in terms of how do you translate. I would suggest that, maybe a student should not immediately end school and immediately go into an online program that might be during the summer. Maybe they need a break. I think sometimes the students may be working hours a day, and that's going to be hard. But I think to remember, if it's a summer program, keep in mind what summer's about. Summer's about fun, doing things different, exploring, getting to know other people, everything we'd like to do during the summer, and learning as well. So keep that in mind when we design these things. So at the end of the course, you will have a strategy. You'll have methods and techniques for delivering your program. We will work with you. And the idea of having this small class, and there'll be no longer more than 9 in a cohort, is that it's going to allow a lot of one-on-one discussion of what you're trying to do. And I think, hopefully, like I do like to do in my online classes, encourage your classmates to be able to share and support each other. You're going to be off from all different organizations with different challenges. So I think hearing how other people approach things will really help you with your own ideas of how to go online. So you'll come up with a program feasibility audit, which you're going to figure out which of my programs and focus on one that you think can go online. What's the best fit? We'll come up with an outline for teaching that or putting that program outline, that unit online. We'll come up with a resource list of methods, tools, and techniques you'll need. And then schedule it, project plan, and then a budget if there's some expenses involved in terms of having to get, which I doubt, well, it could mean, let's say, getting a higher quality microphone, for instance, or a better webcam. These things are inexpensive, but can make the difference. Maybe it means setting up a lighting where you are to make it work better. Maybe it's as simple as getting a green screen, which can be inexpensive, portable, you put behind you. And Zoom, you could have fun with some backgrounds from where you work, from your program, to really help illustrate what you're doing and have some fun with that. So little things like that, there might be some money for. And none of those things are very expensive at all. So the course is 5 days. And as mentioned earlier, it's going to be 2 one-hour interactive classes. We will use Zoom. I sort of inserted myself into this stock picture to realize that I'm going to be an active participant. It will not be a webinar like this because it's not a lot of people, it's a small group. And we're going to have class conferencing, we're going to have collaboration, we're going to get to know each other, and then you'll have all-day access to me. So after the first 1 hour, you will go off, you will work on some activities I'll ask you to do. You can email me if you have questions while you're doing it. So the communication doesn't stop with the class, the 1 hour interactive video, but in between I'll be available as well. So we're going to use the Harvest Blossom e-learning platform. That's where we will gather. This is a sample page from the beginning where you'll have, and we're still designing this, so it's going to look a little bit different than this, but the idea is it's going to be things to do each day. There'll be a preview where there's things to do before the class starts to get ready, because it's intensive. So we want, as much as you put into it, you'll get out of it. So the homework or the assignments you do on your own are going to be very important. So each day there will be activities that we're going to build real things, real deliverables as you go along the week, and you'll have a complete project plan. This is not just how to do it, you're going to do it. So the types of assignments we'll have, and some of these we'll do in the session, many you'll do on your own. Assessing your current program, its units and sessions. Evaluating which units and sessions are appropriate for online. I'm going to give you material to read so you can do a sort of a quick study on what online education, learning, and pedagogy is about. And then hopefully that'll be interesting and select materials which are as interesting as possible. I will provide some video tutorials as well. So some stuff which I don't have to do in class, I'll do ahead of time. We're going to do brainstorming together on the concepts for your online delivery. I think once we start that discussion, you'll be amazed how many interesting ideas will come out about how you can teach your material online. And I think by hearing each other's ideas, we'll be able to take ideas and use them in our own program. So the idea of doing this together in a group is going to be very, very powerful. And like in my own classes, I love when people come from different backgrounds and different skills and different professional bases. It really makes for a very engaging, lively, interesting experience. You'll design and refine your own project details. We're going to provide some templates for you to fill out as you go along the week. We'll provide you a spreadsheet at the beginning in terms of how to assess your own programs. I'll give you a sample project plan, or project charter as I like to call it, so you can understand the description, the requirements, the resources necessary, the risk, and so forth for bringing your program online. So you'll have a complete sort of charter when you're ready to start. And as I mentioned, you'll collaborate with your classmates. So the goal is at the end, you should be able to get to work right away on doing your program. So upon completion of the course, we don't want to leave you high and dry with this. It's not fair to say, okay, we've done all this great work, you're on your own now. You'll have this comprehensive program strategy. I will be available for email for 3 weeks after the course if you have questions about implementation. And then at about the beginning of the 4th week, we're going to have a class reunion. We'll get together with your classmates for an hour and talk about what's worked, what are the challenges, what hasn't worked, where have you had to make adjustments. And then you'll have access to the course materials in the Blossom platform for a year. If next year, let's say you want to recycle and do this again, you can go back and refer to see what was there. So I'm going to give it back to Sandra to talk about some of the enrollment details. Please put your questions in the Q&A so we can kind of help you think about if this will work with you and for your particular situation. Sandra?
Philip, thank you. I have a question.
Yeah.
So the concept of taking camps and summer programs online, this is not, and I want to delve into this just a little bit more because it's not a one-to-one ratio. I think in my mind, I'm thinking I went to Girl Scout camp at Camp Laurel, yay, Camp Laurel. And we had a set program that we did every day. We rose, we raised the flag, we sang, we set the table, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to imagine that in an online context, and the only thing I can think is someone sitting in front of a computer experiencing that all day long. But that's not the intention in your development of online summer programs that used to be in person.
Right. Well, I mean, I think as mentioned earlier by in terms of the burnout, I don't think we want to replicate sort of a school situation. And I think schools, I mean, if you have multiple classes, you're switching from one professor to the next during the day, and that can be pretty stressful in an online situation. No, it's not. See, we can't replicate what happens, let's say, for the camp in terms of the day's scheduled activities. The idea is to pick out particular activities, which by itself will be interesting and engaging to do. It could be arts and crafts where you tell the student or the parent, you get these materials and we're going to teach people how to make things. It could be astronomy where you just talk about astronomy and how to look at the stars, for instance. Individual projects, which then I think maybe you could make, if you have more than one, the participants could choose which they want to use. It's kind of like a STEM camp where you choose to go, I want to go learn about robotics. So you have a robotics workshop, or I want to learn about this, and you have a workshop for that. But maybe there's other ways to, and something to think about to actually have a more of a structure, a camp structure, which I'd love to talk to people about who run camps and think about what works and what's important and what wouldn't work in this environment. I like the idea of a daily check-in where you do some things. Here's what we're going to do today. The participants go on their own. They do the activities and come back and share what they did. So it's not like constantly online. It's sort of like a mentoring in the sense that, okay, here's what I'd like you to try. Here's how to do it. Go try it, come back, and let's see what you've done and share. And do that through a series of iterations of that, for instance, was one approach I think might work well.
I would love to have some people answer that question that you posed, Philip, and that is, what are things that haven't been thought of here? So we are, one of our clients is a science center down in Virginia that's connected with NASA and Langley. Mm-hmm. And in conversation with the executive director there, he started sharing with me things that he felt couldn't translate well, mm-hmm. or things that we hadn't thought about. So if our webinar attendees have some things that they've considered but feel are not translatable, obviously the swimming example or horseback riding, but are there components of that, Phil? So maybe you can't get on a horse and ride, mm-hmm. but are there things that can be translated into an online program that comes out with the same type of learning objectives for that, mastery of body and mastery of self and things like that?
Right. Well, the funny you mentioned the Space Museum in Virginia, because it occurred to me that one thing they could do, which they really can't do in person, is give like a behind-the-scenes tour, mm-hmm. of the Space Center. Can you, mm-hmm. go in some of these aircraft that you couldn't, the general public can't go into, mm-hmm. and you put you get like a webcam, strap it on someone's head, and they sit there as if you're, you're getting exposed to things which you might not be able to see otherwise because you couldn't. No, they wouldn't allow you to do that in person. So things like that. I think the objectives and the outcomes of what you're trying to do in a particular exercise are very important. And I'd really have to do it case by case. It's not. I'll give you an example. Yeah. I was going to design a photography course. I did design a photography course for it to be an online course where the challenges were let's say we're still doing social distancing during the summer. We're not out in the community or we don't want to go out yet. What can a teenager do at home photography wise? It doesn't require going somewhere, that they can do in their backyard, in the house. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things they could do in terms of portrait photography, candid mm-hmm. photography, nature photography outside. A lot of different experiments they can do where you could get the same outcomes. I just have to remember this particular participant might not be able to travel downtown or mm-hmm. go to an event where you might mm-hmm. want to do photography. So there's a lot of things you could do with that. Yeah. You can look at concepts conceptually and describe them and draw them. Doing art drawing class would be great fun to do online. Mm-hmm. I'm an artist, so I'm thinking about how to be creative. Mm-hmm. And it's really, can I stimulate someone to do something online that I usually do in person? Mm-hmm. How do I do that? How do I talk to people? How do I engage them? How do I make sure they're engaged? And that's the challenge of being an online instructor. I think most of our organizations we work with are going to have people who have done this. They're experts in their field. They are the champions of what they do. So it's getting them to turn the switch and think, well, how can I do that remotely to inspire
Yes.
people to do things that I could not, that I usually have done in person? It's just changing your
It's a whole new way of thinking. Yeah, it's a whole new way of thinking. So it's not about the tactic or the technique of what you're doing. It's about the learning behind it and how do we translate that. We have two questions. She asks, for programs that do not translate well, she suggests we've looked at the history of those programs with disguised learning.
Okay, disguised learning. So it's not a term I'm familiar with.
No, me neither.
And I'm going to look it
Chalisa,
up.
can you type a little bit more about that and we'll get back to that.
Or I can even look it up here.
Yeah. Another question is, we teach in an after school in which one of the programs is DJing. Are there some suggestions for translating that online?
Oh,
that's a perfect.
That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be a lot of fun.
I'd want to know how that's done in person.
Mm-hmm.
Is there special equipment? DJing is a big field. There's from as simple as coming up with a really creative playlist to going as far as having hardware so you can actually mix and run a whole performance. But that'd be so much fun, because
that would.
Audio can work really well over online. You can exchange files, you can exchange playlists. I'd love to help think about how to put that together. Yeah. So disguised learning. So stealth learning. Let me just read about this quickly. Disguised learning, also known as stealth learning, is the process of using games and other creative methods to teach young students. Okay, the goals bring. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's another name for, we also call, sometimes we call part of this is gamification, where you actually build in what feels like a game experience, but it's actually a learning experience. But absolutely, that's absolutely how you want to think. I don't like the word disguised learning, because it makes it feel like, you're wearing a disguise and you're pretending, but the idea, I mean, that's really what camp is about, right? So either camp is about learning values through play, it's about learning everything through a fun experience program. So I totally agree with the concept. I just hadn't heard it called disguise. And that's really how you have to think about this, is how do I get children to feel like they're having fun rather than just sitting around and learning?
That's great. We have a couple more questions here that have come in. So some ideas on working with students with social emotional challenges, e.g. hyperactivity, attention deficit, plus other challenges. Perhaps, Philip, this is a time to talk about, again, that it's not all screen time, right? It might be some directive, but then come back, do something, come back, and we'll group and talk about it. Can you go a little bit deeper?
Right. So I think also it brings up the issue of parent involvement. And the parents might have to be involved, one, if there's a cost involved. Two, if they are minor, probably have to get the parents to sign off that their child's allowed to take part in this. Three, the parents might need to help out a little bit. For instance, let's say there's a list of materials you have to put together. And four, if there is a needs challenged child, does the parent have to somehow support that child getting online, understanding what's going on, and sort of encourage them to take part in following up with them during the day, and then perhaps communicating with the coach or the counselor about what's going on if there's challenges there. It's a great question. I think there's some, independent of what's going on, there might be some really interesting opportunities to work with need-challenged children who maybe don't want to leave the house or otherwise can't be in a group situation comfortably, to actually have someone work with them in their own environment, something to explore. But I think certainly you can work with children who have got some kind of challenges in learning. We'd have to customize it to some degree. It's a great question.
It is a good question. And, another question is on the client constituent side, the investment that they might have to make in something like this, because there's a value proposition here that exists because of the online nature of what you're offering to your constituency rather than in person. So, you know, for children who might not have access, or maybe have access, but maybe not the level, you know, a couple of things that Phil and I talked about is we'll be preparing a list of ways to help those children with funding streams that we can find, connections we could make with foundations, discussions we can have on that. But can we address that in this? Are there, I mean, obviously, if there's no computer, then the online doesn't work, right? But are there other lower level obstacles to clients and constituents participating in this?
Oh, are you asking me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm asking you. I'm also asking webinar participants.
Well,
Sahar just wrote in that, you know, it is a challenge, and, you know,
right.
getting them online and getting parent involvement, how can we guarantee that the student and the parent are engaged in this?
Well, listen, there's no guarantee. I mean, I think that, I mean, see, the advantage of having someone having to pay a fee, even if it's really nominal, is that there's some incentive to get their money's worth, so to speak. On the other hand, you don't want to exclude anyone who couldn't otherwise afford it. That's, I think, going to be the toughest part is, I mean, that's true for me when I teach my online courses, or any class for that matter, is what you do when a student seems to be disinterested or not taking part or not attending. And we have ways of following up and see if they're okay. I mean, I would recommend that if a student see, I have to get out of student mode and think camp and counseling and participant mode, that you contact the parent and say, listen, your child didn't show up today, or just sits there, doesn't participate. Is there anything you want to add or help out with? I think that parent involvement is going to be an interesting part that organizations are going to have to think about, because when a kid gets dropped off for day camp, short of that kid having an injury, getting really sick, typically, or getting incredibly homesick, which is more for overnight camp, or for day camp, you're not going to hear about how it went till the end of the day. And it could be 5, 6, 7 hours later. In this case, because the child is at home and the parents or one parent is around, it's going to be a bit different. It could be that maybe you might want to structure so the parent's not involved, that they're not, so the kid can feel independent and feel like a camp. I think kids like camp because their parents aren't around. So what's the challenge of that? I really like, excuse me if I get your name wrong, Shali's idea here of, history of horseback riding, or history bees, or things like Jeopardy or trivia with incentives. Things like that are great ideas to make a fun, interesting, exciting experience that's online that could be done very well. And it's not that difficult to pull off necessarily. Yeah. I mean, it takes some planning, some execution.
Yeah.
I don't think people are going to be able to turn these things on the next day. Yeah. It's going to take some time to put it together, but these are great ideas.
Which is why, so two things, which is why this is a 5-day immersive, because we don't have much time to do this, right? And why there's small cohorts, because this is very, very personalized. This is not webinars about here's some ideas, go do it. This is bring your challenges, let's fix this, let's put it together, let's make sure it works, let's test assumptions, right? Let's come out with something that, as you said, Phil, you will do. It's not, here's what you could do. It's what you will do. Erica has a wonderful, and this is my question.
I saw that, yes.
Do you see it? How technical do we need to be? We're educators, not computer geeks. Do we need a geek? We have a geek to start with.
Yeah, I'm a geek. I mean, but to me, technology is a means to an end. It's not, now, this is not, if you use, now, probably Zoom is going to be the tool for the video communication. Fortunately, the security in Zoom has gotten a lot better. They just released version 5. So there's easy ways of preventing this phenomenon of Zoom bombing, so you don't have to worry about some stranger dropping into your session. There's easy ways to protect that. No, this is you might use the Blossom platform, your own. This is just like, if you can buy stuff online, then you can do this. This is not complicated. There's certainly not any coding involved at all. It's more like, it's preparing your materials that you're going to share, you're going to send to the student. They might bring up themselves, or you're going to show online or make available. You might, one class might require that the student can print stuff out. You might send them something that they need to draw on or fill out, and they need to print it out because they're going to use paper and pencil. Don't assume that the student or the child or the camper is necessarily going to have to, that the product's going to be using the computer, like a computer paint system or illustration system. There could be a course like that, like how to use Photoshop or whatever. But if it's arts and crafts, well, we're going to draw, we're going to build things, we're going to make things. It's music, you might play music, you might write some music, stuff that doesn't require the computer. The computer is the interface, is between you and your camper. And that's not hard to do. So if you plan a good program, a good educational program that's fun and exciting, what we're going to help you do, okay, how do I take the mindset of doing this in person and be able to do it in an engaging, interesting, fun way, knowing that there's this thing, the internet, between me and my participants.
Yes. And you bring up a good point, because if you're already providing materials and tools to your campers, that may still happen. You may still send the child clay if they're part of a arts thing, or paints or something. So this is such a different way of thinking, Phil. I really, really am enjoying expanding it and understanding it more. And so let me just get to some last questions. I want to hold to our promises to everybody here. I do want to tell you, I'm going to put some links in the chat about the courses. We are giving webinar participants a 15% discount if people register before the 5th. The first class starts May 18th. Then they will run weekly through the end of June. The only week they won't run is the week of Memorial Day. And I will drop the links in the chat box, but I want to also get some of these other questions here.
Right. And the other thing, the other thing is that if people are concerned how quickly it takes to turn around to get their program going, that's going to vary with each class and your expertise. So maybe that's an email before the class starts for it. But that certainly, I'm very sensitive to that. If you want to do it this summer, we got to make things happen quickly. So, and that, don't assume it can be happening quickly. Erica, do you see Erica's question about copyright?
Yes. What will the class address copyright? What as educators can we use that we have not developed ourselves? How do we protect what we've developed? How can we monetize it? So the monetization question is interesting, and we'll set that aside, but go ahead and ask.
So the copyright one, so remember copyright, something is copyright the second you put it, you write it, you put it in words. It's copyright. Now, you can register something copyright. It makes it easier if someone steals it and you have to litigate it, but everything's copyright when you put it down on paper. So if you present, whatever you put on the screen, if it's original and yours, it's copyright, and you can say it is. You can use other material if you get permission and you cite it appropriately. Now, fair use laws, if you're not familiar with that, those are laws that allow you to use copyright material in a classroom context if it's not for profit and just for education. So you could use other materials, but you can always try to get permission. So I can help you think about that and how to do that if you think you want to use materials, other materials. There's a lot of material available that's copyright free or that you're allowed to use. It's copyright, but you're allowed to use however you want. So I can give you ideas as resources. How do you protect what we have developed? You just say you protect it. I mean, if you have like, let's say you create a sheet of things to do, like that's original at the bottom. You put copyright 2020, the name of the organization or you, and then it's copyright. Now, whether you want to register for copyright, which is a whole procedure and fees involved, is another thing. But that's not something to worry about. The key thing you want to make sure you do is do not use something that someone else holds the copyright and don't give them credit or get permission, so forth. But I've dealt with that constantly throughout my career in terms of intellectual property and so forth. So I can help you think about that.
Great. I'm just answering a few more questions here. Someone asked, can you please let us know, do we have any group discounts for nonprofit organizations? Yes, we will discuss group discounts. Phil and I talked about that this week after having conversations with a couple of community foundations and also larger groups. So we want to be accommodating of that. So what I would suggest, Manal, is shoot me an email or give me a call at that number, and we'll get on and chat about what that might look like. We'll need to know the number, we'll flesh out all the details, and we'll come to something that will work for your budget.
Yeah, and depending on enrollment, doesn't mean we might, we could run more than one class starting May 18th, depending on the interest. Especially if we have a organization that wants to put a number of people in together, we'll work with you.
Yep. If there's no other questions, we are almost to an hour. I just want to thank you so much. I want to encourage you. There is so much discouragement now out here about what we're going through. This for us is a point of encouragement, and we are honored to be able to build this and work with you to make this happen. So email us at roots@harvestdevelopmentgrp.com if you have more questions. Register at the links that I had provided there. I will do it one more time. You can register right on the Blossom platform. There is a link there. I'm posting right now the Eventbrite. You can register there as well. And then I will post one more time the Blossom e-learning tool. While I'm doing that, Phil, any final thoughts?
I'm just going through the chat. I noticed Carol was asking about dance and drama. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a musician actually, so there's music as well. So yeah, I mean, it gets me excited thinking about the possibilities. So absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I encourage you to continue to think about this. If there are other things that we had not thought about, let us know. In the meantime, I'm going to have some other of our teammates working on the marketing piece, and also Erica's question on monetization. So we'll throw that around a little bit and see if we can come up with some steps and guides for that as well.
Yeah, thank you everybody for taking part. I know that Harvest is really looking forward to helping organizations make this transition. So
good.
Thank you.